You can feel it now. Something in the boys has shifted, not just in tone, not just in violence, but in purpose. Because episode 3 of season 5 doesn't just move the story forward, it quietly reveals what this entire show has been building toward from the very beginning. And if you strip away the chaos, the blood, the satire, you're left staring at something much darker, a story about legacy, control, and evolution. The episode opens in Russia, and right away, something feels off. There's no buildup, no tension, just soldiers walking into a situation they don't understand. And then suddenly Ryan. And what happens next isn't just brutal, it's effortless. It's effortless. Ryan wipes them out like they're nothing. No hesitation, no fear, no confusion. And that's the detail that matters, because Ryan used to hesitate. He used to look for guidance. He used to question what was right and wrong. But here, there's no question anymore, just action. And that's where the real shift begins, because Ryan isn't just becoming powerful, he's becoming comfortable with power. And in the boys, that's always the first step toward becoming dangerous. But here's where most people misunderstand what the show is doing. Ryan is not turning into Homelander. That would be too simple, too predictable. What the show is actually building is something far more unsettling. Ryan is becoming something Homelander never had the chance to be. Because Homelander was created in a lab. He never had love. He never had a real childhood. He never had a choice. Everything he became was shaped by control, isolation, and manipulation. But Ryan had all of that. He had a mother who loved him. He had a brief moment of normal life. He had people trying to guide him. So when Ryan crosses the line now, it's not because he doesn't know better. It's because he's choosing between two broken paths. And that's why his story is more dangerous than Homelander's ever was, because Ryan isn't acting out of emptiness. He's acting out of conflict. And conflict creates instability. Instability creates unpredictability. And unpredictability, that's what turns power into something truly uncontrollable. Now think about his interaction with Butcher. It's quiet, almost easy to overlook, but it's one of the most important scenes in the episode. Because for the first time, Ryan isn't just reacting to the world around him, he's questioning it. When Ryan considers the idea of using the virus to kill Homelander, that's not just a plot point, that's a philosophical turning point. Because it means Ryan is starting to see his father not as a protector, but as a problem. And that's something Homelander can't tolerate, not from the world, and definitely not from his own son. Which brings us to one of the most disturbing moments in the episode. Ryan confronts Homelander, and for a brief second, it feels like this might be the moment everything changes. But it doesn't, because Homelander doesn't just win, he dominates. The fight isn't even close. Ryan tries to stand his ground and gets absolutely crushed. But here's what makes that scene so important. It's not about who's stronger. It's about what that moment does to Ryan. Because in that instant, Ryan learns something. He learns that standing up to power doesn't always work. He learns that morality doesn't protect you. He learns that strength, raw, overwhelming strength, is the only thing that matters in his world. And once that idea takes root, it changes everything. Because in the boys, broken people don't become better. They become worse. Now let's shift to Soldier Boy, because his storyline in this episode doesn't just answer questions, it reframes the entire mythology of the show. For a moment, it looks like the boys have finally found a weapon that works. The virus hits Soldier Boy. He goes down. And for a second, there's hope. But then he gets back up. And just like that, everything changes. At first glance, it feels like a twist designed to raise the stakes, but it's actually something much deeper than that. The reveal that Soldier Boy has V1 in his blood isn't just a plot device. It's the origin of everything we're seeing now. Because V1 isn't just an earlier version of Compound V, it's something else entirely. If modern V creates superheroes, then V1 created something closer to mythology. And suddenly, a lot of things start to make sense. Why Soldier Boy feels different from every other soup. Why he can stand toe-to-toe with Homelander. Why nothing seems to truly break him. It's not just strength, it's composition. Soldier Boy isn't enhanced. He's fundamentally different. Which leads to the question everyone is asking, is Soldier Boy immortal? The answer isn't simple, but based on what we're seeing, he might be as close to immortal as anything in this universe has ever been. The virus doesn't work on him. Time hasn't worn him down in any meaningful way, and psychologically, he's one of the only characters who isn't completely dominated by fear or insecurity. But here's the real twist. Soldier Boy doesn't care about any of it. He's not chasing power, he's not chasing control, he's not trying to become something greater. He just exists. And that's what makes him so dangerous. Because, unlike Homelander, he doesn't need validation. Now compare that to Homelander in this episode, because what we're watching isn't just a villain becoming more unstable. It's a man redefining himself as something beyond human. The hallucinations of Madeline Stillwell aren't just signs of madness. They're signs of transformation. Homelander isn't just losing his grip on reality. He's replacing it. And in his new reality, he's not a man anymore. He's something divine. For years, Homelander has wanted love, approval, recognition. But now, that's not enough. Now he wants something bigger. He wants worship. And when he hears about V1, when he realizes there might be a way to become truly immortal, that desire evolves into something else entirely. He doesn't just want to rule the world, he wants to transcend it. That's why the reveal about Soldier Boy being his father matters so much. Because it's not about truth, it's about narrative. Homelander is rewriting his origin story into something mythological, a god born from a god. It's not reality, but to him it doesn't have to be, because belief is more powerful than truth. And the more people believe in him, the more real that identity becomes. But there's one problem. Soldier Boy doesn't believe any of it. To him, Homelander isn't a divine figure. He's a failure, a disappointment. And that dynamic is crucial because it creates a tension that can only end one way. At some point, they're going to stop talking. And when they do, it won't just be a fight. It'll be a collision between two different versions of power, the past and the present. Which brings us to the most important piece of the puzzle, V1. Right now, V1 isn't just a substance, it's a symbol. It represents the origin of power, the possibility of evolution, the next step, and every major character in this story is being pulled toward it. Homelander wants it to become immortal. The boys want it to either weaponize it or destroy it. Soldier Boy already embodies it. But Ryan might be something even more important. Because Ryan isn't created by V, he's born. And that changes everything. Because if V1 represents the next stage of artificial evolution, then Ryan represents something else entirely, natural evolution. And that's where the real theory begins. What if the endgame of the boys isn't about stopping superheroes? What if it's about what happens when power evolves beyond control? Because think about it. Homelander is unstable. Soldier Boy is uncontrollable. The virus doesn't work the way it's supposed to. And V1 is still out there, waiting to be used. Everything is breaking down. And in the middle of all that chaos, there's Ryan. Learning, adapting, changing. So what happens if Ryan is exposed to V1? Or worse, what if he doesn't need it at all? What if Ryan is already the next step? Because if that's true, then the final conflict of this series isn't going to be humans versus supes. It's going to be something much bigger. It's going to be control versus evolution. Homelander represents control. He wants to dominate, to rule, to be worshipped. Soldier Boy represents the past, raw power, unfiltered, unchanged. But Ryan represents the future, and the future doesn't follow rules, which leads to the most terrifying possibility of all. Ryan doesn't just defeat Homelander, he replaces him, not as a hero, not as a villain, but as something entirely new. Something the world isn't ready for. Because at that point, Ryan wouldn't just be powerful, he would be inevitable. And if that happens, then everything the boys have been fighting for doesn't end, it evolves. Because at its core, this show was never just about superheroes. It was about power, what it does to people, what it reveals, what it destroys. And episode 3 makes one thing very clear. Power doesn't disappear, it changes form. And right now, it's changing into something no one can stop. Ending hook. And if Ryan really is the next evolution of V, then the scariest part of this entire story isn't Homelander anymore. It's this. Ryan still hasn't decided whether he wants to save the world or become the reason it ends.